Welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Reiter. Bill, our division deep dive series continues. You excited?
I'm pumped. Let's go, man. Like it's just from one thing to the next. I'm in. I like your background, by the way. I like the brick is very cool.
Yes. So I'm on location. I am back in the homeland in Philadelphia, at my buddy's place, and this was like one of the few locations that I could do it where there aren't like barking dogs or plumbers. So here we are, third floor. A little hot, but we're going to soldier through. It's going to make us excited.
All right.
There's going to be
All
energy.
right. So when you're sweating, it's not nerves about your team. It's not like,
It
oh
might be.
man,
It
come on,
might be.
Embiid. All right, got
It'll be up to you to determine whether or not it's heat
it.
related or nerves related. All right, so I did the Central Division with Brad Botkin. We saved the Atlantic Division for you. We're bringing in the big guns here. We're going to start with the Boston Celtics. Finished 64 and 18 last year, obviously first in the East. They won the NBA championship, number 18 for them. They were first in offense and second in defense. They were incredible. They didn't add anybody because they didn't need to. They did sign some of their own players. Jason Tatum got a 5-year max during the offseason for $315 million. He is now the highest paid player in NBA history. Derek White returning on a 4-year deal for $118 million. Sam Hauser got 4 for 45, which, Bill, I was like, man, Sam Hauser 4 for 45, and then you look at the comps and you're like, that's what a Sam
Yeah,
Hauser goes for now.
that's the market price.
Top line thoughts on the Boston Celtics offseason and what they look like going into the season.
And I'll just add to that something that is true, and that I think you were the first person on the pod to bring up during the season because they've now won the whole thing. They're not just champions, they're one of the best champions on paper, maybe in NBA history. I mean, this is like in every sort of way that you want to measure success en route to a championship, they are outstanding. And so it's really hard for me. Look, I can make a case, I suppose, and we probably need to as part of just trying to dive into this why they can't win. Or what are some of the weaknesses or Achilles heels? I suppose we could talk about just how hard it is to repeat and human nature, the disease of more, which is what Riley always called it. And I think that's sometimes a real thing, but the drama this offseason, which I guess you could also put into the negative category, might also offset some of that disease of more, some of that complacency. I mean, my top line takeaway is best team in the NBA. I wanted to see if they could actually win big games. They won all the big games and won the big prize. They're the team to beat, and they didn't need to make any moves other than make sure everybody that is critical to that team is back and happy and wants to be there.
Well, the happy part is interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah.
I will say, before we even get to that component, the only thing that I'd be concerned with this team, and it's not even a this year concern, is that they're into the second apron. They're going to be into the second apron for the foreseeable future. Their window now, cap-wise, is probably the next 2 years, because in 2 years' time, KP is up, and then all of a sudden it becomes dicey. But for right now, you have the Jays locked up. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are locked up. Derek White and Drew Holiday are locked up. So 4 of your 5 guys are locked up. Who knows how much longer Al Horford goes, but he'll be returning as well. It gets sticky with the Kristaps
In a year,
Porzingis
right?
thing.
Yeah, I think a year from now when we're talking about this, maybe we're having a conversation like, hey, do they have to get ahead of this a little bit? But this is, I mean, they have a long-term window, but this year is the best that they're going to be in terms of excellence that we know they have. And they don't have to worry about moving puzzle pieces. Yeah, you're right. They will, I think, eventually. Yeah. But this is the window, right? Like they're the best team in the NBA, and they can push off those problems for at least a season.
Yeah, it's a season. You're right, because you have 2 more years of KP left, but you don't want to get to the end of the line and be like, okay, we're either losing him for nothing, or now we're really handicapping ourselves if we do end up bringing him back. The Discord thing, that's interesting, because Jason Tatum goes off to the Olympics and he doesn't play. And then Jaylen Brown doesn't get named to the Olympic team when Kawhi Leonard goes out. Derek White does. Derek White played pretty well when he did play. He didn't play in that final game, but he played pretty well. Drew Holiday seems to be just like the most even-keeled man on the planet. I've always liked that about him. He's great on the court. He's great off the court. But do you put any credence at all into the Olympic drama and intrigue?
So, yes, I guess a little. I would feel – look, do I think it's going to destroy the basketball team? No. Are there some habits that maybe go away, or if guys don't like each other in the locker room, can that matter? It can a little bit, but I think there's just as much an opportunity that Jaylen Brown feeling or being slighted. I think he was slighted. It's crazy, right? Brown is slighted for not going, and Tatum is slighted even though he went. It's like the two stars of this team both got slighted in very different ways.
Yeah.
And if that keeps their focus up, because the big thing about repeating as champions that can make it hard is that you sort of give up on the habits that got you there. What is the thing with boxers? Like, it's hard to get up and train when you're sleeping in silk sheets. I mean, that applies to everybody. But if you've got a chip on your shoulder, that is an automatic motivator to maybe not fall into those traps. And so I think that, yeah, there's a world, John, where Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and whatever jealousy issues about each other or what happened, or Tatum insecurity not winning the MVP, finals MVP last year, and Jaylen Brown did, all that stuff. I think there's a non-zero, a significant, 9% chance it matters in a bad way. But I also think those things can matter in the sense of focusing those guys and pushing back on being complacent, having just won a championship.
I think Jaylen Brown kind of dodged a bullet, because we saw what happened with the rotations with Steve Kerr's rotation. I mean, like, Jason Tatum didn't play. Of course, they swap out Kawhi and they bring in Derek White, and they were right to do it. At first, I was like, this is strange. And then in retrospect, thinking about team needs and point of attack and perimeter defense, Derek White obviously fit much better with what they didn't have and what they needed than a wing would have. And they bring in Jaylen Brown, and then all of a sudden he doesn't play. Now you got two Celtics who aren't playing, and like, what's that look like? So,
that's a good point.
Might have worked out. Yeah, it might have worked out okay for him. What about Joe Mazzulla? Joe Mazzulla is now a championship head coach. We like to have some fun with Joe Mazzulla, and he is a little quirky. I have a question for you, because you're a soccer guy. Did you see Mikel Arteta, who coaches Arsenal, hired pickpockets? Okay, so for people who don't know,
oh my God, this is so ridiculous.
A very interesting human being, and a handsome and talented man by all regards, but also like a little quirky. So I'm evidently at a team dinner where his team is all gathered together and just relaxing. He hired a team of pickpockets, and at the end of the dinner, he was like, everybody's like reaching for their wallet, and it was a way to teach these guys, I guess, teach in air quotes, to always be on guard, even at a time when you're
against your coach. Don't trust your coach is the lesson.
It made me think a little bit of Joe Mazzulla, because Joe's a little unusual as well. How do you feel about him as a championship head coach heading into another season?
Weirdo in a good way. And by the way, soccer comparisons, Pep Guardiola showed up at the finals because he's his buddy. And then we talked about it a little bit, but that is, if we're going soccer, that's a pretty big shout from, Pep is the best coach in the world at what he does, and probably the best coach in the world, period. Like, he might be in any sport. So again, I'm going to make sort of a case, because I think it's something to bring up. I don't actually believe it's going to be a major issue, but if you think that there is a possibility that Jaylen Brown's going to be put out, that he wasn't at the Olympics, and pissed off at Derek and pissed off at Jason for being there, and you think there's a world where Jason's going to be a little put out that he didn't get to play, and this is a lot of ifs, right? A lot of Freudian ifs.
Yeah.
And Tatum is also still sort of perturbed he wasn't the finals MVP. And he was a little, remember in like March or April, he said, I'm not going to win MVP. Maybe it's earlier because we have such a good team around me. I won't get the votes I deserve. If you think all that mess is real, I do wonder if Mazzulla is the guy to manage that, because he is kind of unusual, and he is sort of tactically, I think, really good at the job, but he hasn't been tested with a returning champion team where their stars are mad at each other. So maybe there's a world where that's a bit of an issue, and I think it's a non-zero percentage chance, but I'm not worried. I'm worried about a lot of teams we're going to talk about for a lot of different reasons. I'm just not worried about the Celtics, and I'm having to sort of contrive a little bit here to create some sort of scenario. They're in real good shape.
Me too. I feel the same way. Although, who knows? Maybe Mazzulla does go out and hire some pickpockets. I don't know where you find a team of pickpockets.
And how do you know they're not going to keep your stuff?
Like, Arteta, do you Google this? Do you have like somebody who knows somebody? Very strange. I'm going to ask you this. So, as I mentioned, I'm in Philadelphia. This morning, I did some stuff for CBS Local, CBS 3 here in Philadelphia, with my guy, Pat Gallen. Shouts to Pat. And he asked me this question. He said, well, what has to happen for the Sixers or the Knicks or somebody to beat the Celtics? Basically, the question to you, Bill, is what has to happen for the Celtics not to win the East?
Okay, so we're going to talk about this with some of these other teams. Look, I think, there's the ifs. I guess there's a world where this is a fractured basketball team because of some of the Olympics drama, and maybe if there was anything with Jaylen Brown being finals MVP, which, by the way, I thought was deserved over Tatum, but whatever. That's, I guess, a scenario. The more likely outcome outside of injury, right? If we're talking like outside of sort of Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown going down through the year, is the Knicks or the Sixers. And I think that's the list for me because Doc Rivers is still Doc Rivers, making such a leap. The Knicks with the addition, we're going to talk about these teams, but their challengers make such a leap that they're not going to be as good, I think, on paper as Boston, but they're close. And they win a riveting 7-game series where maybe Boston could have won, but there's just some big moments from Jaylen Brown or big moments from Paul George. That's the answer. I think it's hard to conceive of a realistic scenario where Boston's not the favorite for the entirety of the year in the East, at least.
Yeah, that was basically my answer. It was, well, probably some injuries have to happen. Your Jason Tatum shooting continues to be a problem. Maybe Jaylen Brown is not feeling great about what happened. There's some discord there. You know, KP had an amazing season last year. Maybe he regresses a little bit. There's a lot of ifs that would have to happen. And then on top of that, the Knicks or the Sixers would have to have an incredible season and everything would have to break right.
Combination of –
yeah.
And I know we're talking the same thing over and over, but the other thing is when these fractured situations sometimes happen, usually it's in conjunction with guys not getting paid and the timing of how these guys, like the critical guys, have all gotten paid. And so if you're really a little frustrated, if you're Jason Tatum, as an example, you just got paid. Like you are respected by your employer based on what they pay you, whether it's this or it's sell insurance or it's playing in the NBA. And so I think they're going to be okay on that front because it's not as if they have to make a difficult decision on whether to extend Tatum, done, or pay Jaylen Brown, already been paid, or even Derek White. I mean, it's that they've handled this masterfully in Boston.
They have, and I hate it. We usually, at least in the first pod for the division deep dive so far, we've been wrapping up each of the teams with a best move or moment and a worst move or moment. The Celtics didn't have a move because they didn't add anybody. They just re-signed somebody. But give me your best move or moment for this team so far this offseason.
I mean, best move is actually, I think, counterintuitively, it's the same answer. It's the Olympics. So we'll just see how it plays out. Because not that they need a lot of help, but guys will tell you when you play on that Olympics team as a non-superstar, it can elevate your self-confidence in your game. I don't think Drew Holiday did it. Jason Tatum had a different experience. But I think Derek White going and playing good minutes when he played is just it reinforces how significant of a winner he is. And he can see himself as a star, even if he's the 4th or 5th or 6th guy on that particular team. And again, I don't really buy this, and there's not really a worse move. But if you want me to come up with one, we'll see maybe again if Jason Tatum being DNP by Steve Kerr in 2 games leads to some sort of I got to prove myself, and he gets out of the rhythm and the flow of being a team guy on a team that is really, really deep.
My best move or moment is that they didn't make a trade or sign anybody because they didn't have to. This team is really good. They're just loaded up. It's nice for them to go, hey, we had the parade and Jason and Derek White went off to the Olympics and everybody else is enjoying a nice, and Drew Holiday as well. And everybody else is enjoying a nice off season, probably putting their feet in the sand. And I'm sure that they're working on their game and all that stuff, but they're just set up really well. They anticipated what the CBA was going to look like. They went and got Drew Holiday extended ahead of that kicking in and Derek White and Tatum extended now. And, you know, like we said, they have another year at least. And then next season, we'll see what happens. And the worst moment, obviously, it was Jason Tatum at the Olympics. I mean, I know that he's going to get asked about it a ton, and his answer is going to be what we anticipate, which is, hey, it's not a big deal. As an Olympian, I played a little bit. I guess why Steve Kerr did it, whatever. Even though his parents were on social media complaining about this, which I thought was very funny. Thank you to Jason Tatum's parents for that. I'm never going to let anybody in Boston forget that. But he's going to play the professional on this, but it has to be in the back of his mind a little bit, right? And we know it was in the front of Jaylen Brown's mind. Like he was tweeting about it too. So that wasn't great for them, the Olympics. All right, so that's the Boston Celtics. We got one in the books. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we're going to talk about the rest of the Atlantic Division, beginning with the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers, who we think will be hot on the heels of the Boston Celtics, but we'll see how hot. That's on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John and Bill continuing our division deep dive series with the Atlantic Division. Just a reminder, by the way, you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, and leave us a review. It helps people find us. We did the Central Division previously. We're into the Atlantic Division now. We just did the Celtics. Now we're into the Knicks and the Sixers. I'm glad you're doing this division with me because I need like somebody who can see the forest for the trees, right? I'm super into the Knicks and the Sixers and what they've done this season, and I just like it's hard for me to parse like how close they've gotten to the Celtics. Knicks, we'll start with the Knicks, Bill. Incredible season last year, 50-32, second in the East, lost in the second round to the Pacers in a 7-game series. But that had a lot to do with injuries. They were just spent. Thibs had played all his guys as many minutes as he possibly could.
As he always does.
They were top 10 in offense and defense last year, Bill. And then they go, and I think that they grossly overpaid for him. However, he's on the team now, and it's going to make them better. They go and get Mikal Bridges for 5 first-round picks. They did lose Isaiah Hartenstein, though, and Bojan Bogdanovic, and to a lesser extent, Alec Burks and Shake Milton. But on the whole, this is a very deep team now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Hartenstein thing I think it's a significant loss, but there are such significant additions. Here's the big question for me on this team. They're incredibly deep. They are maybe the deepest team. I mean, they're not – I don't know. Are they as deep as the Celtics? Like I was thinking about this morning. They might – as silly as that sounds, because I think the Celtics are the deepest championship team we've seen in a long time because the sort of responsibility was spread out among 5 or 6 really critical guys in Boston in that run. I think New York is as deeper, maybe in a little bit different way because obviously Brunson is the star, and that is clear. I think Thibs is amazing. I think everything he's done should be celebrated. I think turning around that organization by Leon Rose, who runs basketball operations, and Thibs is a shocking accomplishment because of how corrosively awful and toxic that culture was. I mean, fans know, but you and I as reporters probably know a little more. Just to walk into that building, you can just feel the ick sometimes. Like that was not a great place on every level, and they fixed it. Okay, that's all my Thibs praise. He's got to be able to actually manage rotations and minutes. You can't play the same 5 guys all the time. You cannot be playing some of these dudes 38, 40 minutes. And so the big question for me on New York is staggering the minutes properly and coming up with the right rotations, both to make use of the depth and have those guys feel involved and invested, and just avoid injuries over the long season. And Thibs has a lot of strength. That's not one of them. And so I'm highly skeptical that zebra is going to change his they're not spots, his lines.
His stripes, his lines.
Stripes. I had a long day. It's early. They're not spots.
Listen, you bring up a really good point about the depth, and it's something that I've considered and thought about a lot because I think that the Celtics, obviously, they just won a championship. Their first 5 to 6 guys are, by definition of what we just saw, the best 5 to 6 guys in the NBA. But there's a real case to be made that the Knicks have a better 8 to 9 guys, right? Yeah. I mean, like, because when you look at now, because of bringing in Mikal Bridges and re-signing OG Anunoby, by the way, he got 5 years, $212 million this offseason. Bring back Precious. Now Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo go to the bench, right? And you've got Deuce. So that's 8 guys right there. Plus Precious Achiuwa is probably your backup big now, and I like him just fine for 18 minutes a game. So that's 8 to 9 guys that Thibs is going to have to play.
And Randall back. I mean, it's
sure. Julius Randle back.
Yeah,
that's a deeper back end of the bench than the Celtics have. We should note also that this was made possible by Jalen Brunson taking the hometown discount of all hometown discounts. He takes a 4-year deal for $156 million. That's $113 million less than if he had waited a year. It's going to cost him about $37.1 million over the next 3 seasons. That has made this whole construction possible. Now, I wonder, because you were mentioning like your worth, how much money you're worth or paid determines, value, right? And I get why he did this. He wants to win a championship. I think it's amazing. But I also think like that whole idea of the way that it was framed, that, hey, he can make some of that money up on the back end in 4 or 5 years. Well, in 4 or 5 years, he will be 31 or 32 years old. 4 or 5 years ago, he wasn't anywhere near this kind of money. A lot can change in that time. And I just think like it's a guaranteed.
Oh yeah. No, and I think he does it knowingly too. I think so. I've been wrong about a lot of things. We all will be. I've never been as wrong about an NBA player as I have been Jalen Brunson. I did not think when he came from Dallas that it was going to be a great signing. It was beyond a great signing. And I mean, it wasn't the question of the moment, but it was also just hard to conceive of how selfless this guy is. There is no guarantee he's going to get paid. And I think he knows it, John. I think this is one of those rare guys that clearly wants to win over getting paid. It's not like $156 million is not a lot of money, but still he could have a lot more. And think about if you're OG or you're Bridges and you're any of these guys who got paid because of this guy, or you're on a team where you have a chance to win, you're going to run through a wall for this dude. Like the automatic chemistry boost that it does for, again, what used to be a toxic basketball environment. I mean, it's not just the guys he brought in, which is significant or allows him to sort of pay the money he allows them to spend on other people. It's the immediate chemistry that I think this has to create when your leader's like, nah, man, I'm about winning. You guys get paid. Let's run through a bleeping wall and do this. It's amazing.
The chemistry thing is absolutely real. The vibes are real. The Nova Knicks expanding their group, right? He's the leader of the Nova Knicks. Then they put out the press release saying that he'd been named team captain and make it a big deal, right? Like there's only been 36 team captains in Knicks history, and they haven't had one since whoever was the last, I forget already who the last one was in like 2018, 2019, something like that. And I'm like, okay, sure. Like, that's great. That's still so much money to leave on the table.
So much money.
And look, Jalen Brunson, by all accounts, is a good dude, a smart dude. He's a great teammate, right? But you left that money on the table trying to win a championship. You want to win that bad. You have a massive obstacle in your conference in the Boston Celtics that you got to get over. And if you don't end up winning a championship, 5-10 years from now, you're going to look back, maybe, I'm just saying maybe, and go, that's like generational. You're right. 156 million is a lot of money. 270 is more. So I don't know.
I mean, if you don't make a conference finals, for example, just to say a conference finals,
at a minimum.
And by the way, we'll get to Philly. Philly's not going to be easy to go through. Obviously, Boston, if you end up in that situation, is going to be brutal to go through. If you go out in the second round again, but here's the thing. I think all of that direness and that all is on the back end of this season if it doesn't pan out in May.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't pan out in May. And look, it's his money. I'm not going to count his money. I think that they're good enough to beat Boston. I don't know that I believe it'll happen because of the Thibs thing, but if you were to take your coach in this place, if you took Nick Nurse and you put him on the Knicks, right? You just like subbed him in for a year, I would be comfortable saying, health allowing, the Knicks aren't as good as Boston, but they're good enough to they can beat them it's almost a coin flip. You manage that roster properly, I think the Knicks can make the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and that's going to be an issue. And we're going to get to the Sixers, as you mentioned, but I almost kind of think about, like, when we're talking about impediments for the Celtics, I almost, even though this is like, sacrilege for both cities, the Knicks and the Sixers being like one unit, right? Because it's two chances to knock off the Celtics.
I love that.
But, I mean, it's two really good teams that'll challenge them. They're not as good as Boston, but it's going to be. It just makes the road more complicated for the Celtics. Too. Yeah. Let's do best and worst moments for the Knicks.
Okay. I mean, I love that Bridges is coming in, but my best is going to be OG just being back. Remember there was a slight moment there where people thought maybe he wasn't going to be back. And when he played, and again, he's got to be healthy, but when he played, that team was basically unbeatable. So it's the best moment is the combination of just getting him under contract, getting him paid, and having enough depth. Again, if Thibs is willing to do it, you can stagger Anunoby's minutes. You don't have to play him a lot of minutes over the course of the year. You can manage him well. And I think that's critically important. So I'm sort of torn on what the worst is. A few years from now, maybe I'll look back and say that I should have said Bridges because it's a terrible contract and it's a lot they gave up. But I think losing Hartenstein is a significant thing. And whenever we get to Oklahoma City and we get to the West, I think it's huge for Oklahoma City. At least Hartenstein's not a competitor in the Eastern Conference. And I understand the math behind why you had to do it. And I think the Knicks are – but I think that's it's an understandable loss, but I think it is really significant. For people who didn't watch a lot of Knicks games, it's a big deal, even though shinier, bigger names have stayed or coming.
I think those are good. I mean, Hartenstein for sure is a big blow. He was so good for them last year. He was a real revelation too. I mean, because you had Mitchell Robinson in that starting lineup to begin, right? And he's a Thibs type of player, and almost like it's almost saving Thibs from himself, right? Like Mitchell Robinson went down, and all of a sudden Hartenstein started getting more minutes, and you're like, wow, he unlocks a lot of things because he does things that Mitchell Robinson doesn't do, namely and especially pass the ball really well. So that's a bummer for them. My best and worst, I'm going to go getting Brunson to sign that contract because look, there are, even with Brunson signing that contract, like putting that team together, they're still in the first apron. So it's not like they're completely out of cap hell, but they would have been way into the second apron if not moving forward. And now all of a sudden you go and throw OG Anunoby 5 years for $212 million. By the way, OG Anunoby got an extra year and roughly $55 million more than Jalen Brunson just signed for. Like,
it's crazy.
I mean, it's an unbelievable.
Dude, you're so stuck on this, and for a good reason, because it's crazy. But it's by the way, it's probably going to end up being a mistake, right? It's not our decision to make what people do with their money, but because it's the Knicks and they always mess it up. But for the moment, it's magical because the New York Knicks have a real chance because Jalen Brunson gave up millions and millions of guaranteed money to give it to other guys to try and win. Like it's awesome.
I am very into how teams are constructed. And this is, it's not analogous completely. It's not an apples to apples comparison. However, it's similar to, there are similar themes to Shohei Ohtani deferring all his money so that the Los Angeles Dodgers can build a team around him. And he's like, I'll get my money later. And I'm like, that's banana. I mean, like it's a Bobby Bonilla situation, but Jalen Brunson is doing the NBA equivalent of it. And then the worst moment for me is kind of a little tongue in cheek here, but I think it's going to be Thibs having too many good players. Like he's somewhere right now.
It's real.
It's like freaking out. Just we're talking about me sweating and whether it was heat or nerves. Thibs is going to have somebody go, please, like, can we get a wellness check on Tom Thibodeau? He's probably yelling at Leon Rose, stop signing all these good players. I don't have room to play them.
I don't know what to do.
It's too many for him. Do you want to take a break and then do the Sixers? Yeah, we might as well, right? Should we take a little break here and then we'll come back and do the final three teams? All right, on the other side, we'll get into the other team in the Eastern Conference that we think could be an impediment potentially to the Boston Celtics, maybe contend like the New York Knicks. That's the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll do that next. This is Beyond the Arc.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sports into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. You can also find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. We have lots of great content over there. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. We're trying to build a little community here. All right, we're continuing, Bill and I are, with the Atlantic Division deep dive. We've done the top two teams from last year. Now we come to the Philadelphia 76ers. They were 47-35. A little bit of a weird year for them, Bill. 7th in the East. They were playing great. Joel Embiid was having an MVP season. He was scoring more than a point a minute, put up 70 against the Spurs. I was really enjoying myself, and that was my fault because then the wheels came off and Joel Embiid got hurt and they fell into the play-in, and then, it was difficult for them. They ended up losing in the first round to the Knicks in an awesome series, maybe the best series of the entire playoffs in 6 games. Their offensive and defensive rankings, again, skewed by the fact that Embiid was out. Then they have Daryl Morey deciding it's going to be a cap space gamble. Has $65 million, puts all his chips on Paul George, somehow pays it off and signs him for 4 years, $212 million deal. And then they end up adding Caleb Martin and Andre Drummond and Eric Gordon and Reggie Jackson. And they lost a whole bunch of other players, but it really was, including Tobias Harris, who nobody was sad to see go, and Nico Batum. Your top line thoughts on just a magic trick of an offseason from Daryl Morey?
You know how I'm sure you play fantasy sports, I play fantasy football, and we have a league where you can keep 2 guys every year, and then you have to start over, and it's the most ridiculous, not realistic thing on earth, unless you're apparently Daryl Morey, because it's not real life. And so my takeaway is classic Daryl Morey, because what he pulled off on paper is absurd. Like, it looks really good. And so it could be really good. I'm always high. Like, I'm not a scarred Sixers fan, so I can look at this team and say, if it all comes together and Embiid's healthy, all the things we'll talk about, they are, like the Knicks, good enough to push Boston. Not be favored, but maybe beat them. The thing that's the question mark, and it's very Daryl Morey, because Daryl operates in the abstract and the sort of science and the numbers, is you still have to become a basketball team. Like, you have to like each other, and you have to learn how to play together. And we've seen superstars, right, who sort of get paired up, and it can be a process of half a season or a whole season. But normally a superstar joins another superstar with a team that was already a team. This is Embiid and Maxey, and there's a bunch of random guys who haven't really played together. And so it's going to be really interesting to see whether they can. And I think Nick Nurse is a great coach, but are they able to take the pieces and make them work before we get into what Paul George is about and Embiid and how he plays and Maxey making another jump? There's a range here of just how they operate as a group that is hard to know until we are 20 or 25 games into the season.
Yeah, generally these things take time. I mean, there's a reason why big time additions at the trade deadline don't often pay off right away in that season. They rebooted this entire thing around two guys in an offseason. Now, will a full season be enough for all of these guys to coalesce? I don't know. On paper, just like purely academically, I love what they did here. I mean, I can't believe that Daryl Morey had the stones to even attempt it, because this is how, if they miss out, Bill, on Paul George, if they don't sign him, if he sticks with the Clippers and he doesn't take 4 years and $212 million from the Sixers, the alternatives, and you and I talked about them on the show, you're like Brandon Ingram, maybe, but you got to trade for him. Right. Yeah, I mean, like, it would have been, that's the kind of thing that you end up getting fired for down the line. And instead, he goes and gets Andre Drummond for nothing because the Chicago Bulls front office is completely inept.
Nice backup.
I mean, just horrendous, right? Eric Gordon on a vet minimum. Caleb Martin, just less money that he could have gotten from Miami. They bring back Tyrese Maxey. Obviously, he was always going to get a max. He got a max. Kelly Oubre, grossly criminally underpaid last year. They got him for $8 million a year for 2 years. Like, he was a huge foundational rotation piece for them last year and a two-way player. It's a very deep team. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you caught this, but this was interesting. So they go and they build this team. And they're into the first apron, but they're not hard capped. So they do have a little bit of flexibility. But KJ Martin, they end up re-signing KJ Martin to a 2-year deal for $16 million, which is the same amount of money that Kelly Oubre got. Now, most people would go, why would they do that? The reason why is for salary matching purposes. So basically, KJ Martin, just by virtue of being like in proximity to this team that wants to have a player for salary matching purposes for trading down the line, he just got overpaid just because they needed somebody on the books. How awesome is that?
I wish our business worked this way.
I want that.
Can I also add in that Paul George is coming off the best season of his career for people that maybe, I mean, they didn't just get like a star that was on the market. PG had the best. Yeah, so Daryl, look, I know Daryl, you know Daryl. Everybody that knows Daryl likes Daryl because he's gregarious and he's funny and he's charming. But he has had some real fails with his philosophy, and he's had some real successes. I think on paper, this is the most impressive run, like in a couple month period that he's ever had. That is saying something, because he is a gambler and he's always been pretty bold. I don't want to be too optimistic, because I was last year. Once Embiid had that 70-point game, I was telling you that, like, hey, get ready for the parade. And you correctly got sad in the good moments and told me that this was. You tried to emotionally guard yourself. And
you got to brace for
force field. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought I was helping you. So I won't get too excited, but I love what they are.
This is a much deeper team, right? And it's deeper in really critical areas, because I don't know about you, but I think Paul George is a seamless fit, like immediately as the third guy who plays at both ends of the floor. And as you mentioned, he's coming off the best season of his career, the highest field goal percentage and the highest 3-point percentage. That's exactly what you would need. And now you can throw him at the best wing or best guard on the other team on defense. He's really going to paper over a lot of the concerns that they had last year. Andre Drummond, they've needed a backup center for Joel Embiid since Andre Drummond was the backup center, so they finally get him back. And then Kelly Oubre on the wing and Caleb Martin on the wing are huge. I mean, there's in Philly, because there's always something to complain about in Philadelphia. You can't be happy. Nobody can be happy here. Everybody's like, why don't they have a power forward? I'm like, yeah, but they've got great guard play, great wings, and one of the two best centers in the NBA. That's about as good as you can do.
Let me ask you a question I was thinking about today. You tell me if this is dumb. Like, it might be dumb, but I was thinking about sort of my view on the Sixers, and there's a lot to talk about, but obviously a lot of it falls and rises on Embiid and being healthy and being durable. And the fact they got Drummond made me think. Last year, I just looked it up. Last year he played basically 35 minutes per game. That's a lot of minutes, and he looked old and kind of slow at the Olympics. And the counter to that is it takes him a while to get going. All right. Would you be up for Nick Nurse just making a conscious decision, the way that Pop used to back in the day as Duncan got older and some of those other guys, just limiting Embiid most nights to 28 to 30 minutes a game and basically trying to err on the side of making sure he's healthy by limiting his minutes? Do you think Philly can win enough games if he's playing 28 to 30 minutes a game, the way Pop did at the end of those first teams?
Absolutely, yes. I think the sweet spot is probably 30, 32, but yes, that's about the right ballpark for me. And encouraging returns on that so far, right? I mean, that upon signing Paul George, that Joel Embiid was asked about it, and he said, "Hey, look, I understand that it's not about winning the most games during the regular season. That I really do need to be healthy for the postseason." And Andre Drummond is a nice little backup, backstop for Joel Embiid when he's out there. If you're getting 18 to 22 minutes out of Andre Drummond, that means you're playing Joel Embiid about 30 minutes a game, which is probably right for the regular season. And look, Joel Embiid, when he was playing 35, 40 minutes a game, a lot of that was, there's only so many options. There's Tyrese Maxey, but then after that, the drop-off was pretty steep to Tobias Harris. And he was putting up such insane video game numbers that he could have been making a run for an MVP again. I think now he's like, whatever, MVP, I'm good.
He needs to be. So I'm glad because the thing is, he got his MVP, and you're right. Last year, the problem, it's almost a curse that he was having a historic year because it's like in baseball back before they ruined it. Like if a guy's on pace for 70 home runs, you can't say, we're going to rest him every 4 days. Like, no, man, you got to chase the magic. And Embiid having that start and the way, as you said, he was scoring more than a point per minute and the 70-point game. I can't believe it was detrimental. Like I was wrapped up in it too. You got to limit him to the maximum extent that you can, because we just saw when they came in as a 7 seed, how good they were when he was able to sort of fight through it. I want to see Joel Embiid in a playoff run with Paul George and Tyrese Maxey next to him and some depth where he's not injured. He's not banged up. He's not coming back from injury. He's sort of ready to go. We haven't seen that.
And you've got some redundancy there, right? In terms of Tyrese Maxey, another year, another step forward, and Paul George. Now this is like the best crew that he's played with probably since 2019 when they lost on the aforementioned 4-bounce Kawhi Leonard circus shot. So I think that it's as good as it could be given the circumstances and given the competition. And finishing 7th again, that's not where they want to be. But if they're 2 or 3.
Yes.
Either right behind the Celtics or right behind the Celtics in the Knicks, that would be perfect positioning for them. And then you'll see what happens. Best and worst moments for the Sixers.
Best moment for the Sixers is the Clippers being idiots and being the Clippers. You were listing off all the sort of really impressive market deals that Morey got. And I thought, does he have spies and I know he doesn't, but other front offices where they're like, okay, these guys are idiots and they're going to screw that. I mean, the Clippers are the best thing that have happened to Daryl Morey in the last 3 or 4 years. So thank you, Clippers, for being the Clippers as it relates to the Sixers, because Paul George should not have been available. And I mean, the worst thing, it's hard to know right now because I don't know how these pieces are going to work. So I'll just go with the easy cop out of I am a little worried about how Embiid looked at times in the Olympics, and he got sharper as it went along, but he looked old. Like he didn't look injured. He looked like an old dude.
He's only 30.
And it's the year, it's the miles, not the years, right? I know. And I think some of it's the fit. We talked about this. He looked lumbering and he looked out of shape. I'm hoping that won't be an issue, but it is a red flag. It is a red flag. And he's not getting younger.
He was awesome in the Serbia game. That gave me hope, and the rest of it I don't care about. And he came out of it ostensibly healthy. For me, the best and worst are best Daryl Morey pulling it off. I can't believe he did. He did. There were a lot of people who were super doubting Daryl Morey. I've always been a huge fan of him. I think he's been one of the best general managers in the NBA since he took over the Houston Rockets in the mid-aughts. There are a lot of people who go, well, he hasn't won a championship. It's hard to win a championship. There's 30 teams out there. You just want to be relevant and have a chance, and he usually gives his team a chance, and I think that's what he's done again here. And then the worst moment for me, and I say this only slightly with tongue-in-cheek, Embiid at the Olympics, when he had a chance, Rudy Gobert had fallen into Joel Embiid. And if you haven't seen this picture, I highly recommend you go and check it out. But Rudy Gobert's head was around Joel Embiid's area. Let's just call it that. And Joel Embiid, as we all know, has been known to do the DX pro wrestling crotch chop, and had an opportunity to crotch chop Rudy Gobert and resisted. And that's not what I want. Mature Joel Embiid.
Here's what I'm going to say, is that my thought on this is if you do the chop, which I've just done on our YouTube stream, and you are in a vulnerable position as it relates to your area, you don't want to provoke Rudy Gobert to just be like, you know what, I get mocked all the time. I'm treated badly on my own team. I can't get minutes. Draymond Green flew here, just laugh at me. And now this guy's standing over me doing I'm just going to raise my head very, very quickly.
Fair enough. You are vulnerable. You do have to be protective there. However, Joel Embiid crotch chopped the entire arena, and all of the French fans, all of France, and somehow resisted crotch chopping the one Frenchman that everybody wants to do it to.
Yeah.
And I just like, what a missed opportunity.
Fair. It's a good point.
All right, so those are the top three teams, and now we are into, well, we won't call them the dregs of the Atlantic Division,
I was
but
going to
they
go
are
dregs.
definitely
Not dregs?
Well, here's why I wouldn't go dregs. It's just because like the Nets have positioned themselves with this Mikal Bridges trade. We're into the Nets here, and then we're going to do the Raptors. I think both of these two teams will be bad, and that they plan on like sort of rebooting. But will they be bad enough and reboot enough and quickly enough this season? I think that the Nets are certainly going to try it for Cooper Flag. They finished 32-50 last year, 11th in the East, in the 20s in both offense and defense. They add Bojan Bogdanovic, Shake Milton, Killian Hayes, and Zaire Williams. They lose obviously Mikal Bridges. They do re-sign Nick Claxton, who could be like a little centerpiece for them, or maybe they reroute him somewhere else, 4 years for $97 million, well under the first apron bill. But crucially, they regain control of their draft coming up for this 2025 draft, where Cooper Flag is going to be the main jewel that everybody's going to try to get. So that means that they can tank hard at this thing. And oh, by the way, if it works out for them, they could potentially take them.
And as I'm sure people know, but it bears repeating, Flag is considered to be a legit, generational, remarkable. The guy's going to be awesome. It's funny. I think that they had as good of an offseason as Philadelphia. Justin, they have very different goals, right?
Yeah.
Daryl has to win now, and the Nets. As soon as that thing fell apart and Durant wasn't there, and those guys, you had to find a way to get those picks back and get some control of your future. And it sucks for fans. The good news is there aren't many Nets fans anyway. They're kind of like Clippers fans. They're not really a thing. So I mean, this is a rebuild. They're not going to be particularly interesting to watch. There's more guys that they can move, and they should, and I'm sure that they will. But it's a rebuild, and good job them, even if it sucks for the few people that actually care about the Nets.
I totally agree. I thought that, like, look, the Nets had kind of like backed themselves into a little bit of a corner, right? And it was a situation where they were like, okay, well, how do, like, we're telling everybody we're going to build around Mikal Bridges, and Mikal Bridges is off the table. And then they realize rightly that, hey, 5 picks for Mikal Bridges is absolutely something that we should do. And so they moved Mikal Bridges on. And now, by the way, they still have some other nice pieces that they can dangle at people before the trade deadline, right? Because Cam Thomas still there, Cam Johnson's still there, Dorian Finney-Smith's still there. Yep. Yeah, those are great players. I mean, Cam Johnson's a guy that I thought would have been a really good fit for the Sixers when they didn't have anybody. Now that it would be hard for them to pull off that math. And again, Nick Claxton, if they wanted to move on. So they've really rebooted this thing hard. And let me throw one more at you. Last season of Ben Simmons at $40 million, and that becomes an expiring contract. So they get off that money too.
Oh, so we're also a year away from Ben playing in the Chinese Super League or whatever it's called. Congratulations, Ben.
Back to Australia, maybe?
Just retire. I know that's not – just retire, dude. He doesn't like basketball, does he?
So you're not falling for yet another offseason of him in an empty gym hitting threes? I fell for that for so many years in a row. I was like, I think this is the year he adds a jump shot.
Does it create some nostalgia for you? When you see it, do you have like little pangs?
Yeah, and there's some empathy for Nets fans, for the few of them, as you mentioned, who exist, where I'm like, man, you poor people. Do you think, like, we're joking about Australia and China a little bit, but it could also be reality. I mean, like, he's a former first-round pick, and he can do a lot of things on the basketball court. But as you mentioned, I don't know about the motivation. I don't know, like, if he likes basketball and wants to play. He's made a lot of money. If he wants a job in the NBA, somebody will give it to him. But do you think he wants it? And what would he even be worth? Is it vet minimum time now?
I mean, vet minimum is 100%. It just feels like, who is paying him anything other than that? I mean, it's just, we have a longitudinal level of data that the guy can't stay healthy, isn't healthy, can't play, whatever his issues are. I think it's out of the league. Or maybe it's vet minimum for a year, right? For a year. And then I think he's out of the league in a year or two, maybe
what
two.
Would forget about the money for a second. Let's say he does want to stay in the league. What's a good scenario for, like, what's a good situation? Because we talk a lot about, like, sometimes you get a player who's drafted to a team and it's just a bad fit, and you think, man, if he'd only ended up at a different team, this team with this coach, maybe it would work out for him. Like, where would be a good landing spot for him where he could, like, take some pressure off, have a good coach, have a role that's defined where, like, he's not going to shoot, but he could be sort of like bad, like he's a better Josh Giddey, but also a worse Josh Giddey,
like
somehow
coming off the bench, playing great defense, maybe running the offense for the second team.
Yeah.
Houston comes to mind, right? Like if they continue to develop, they don't need him, but Oklahoma City, like Sam likes to collect. He's a market opportunity guy, so he's the kind of guy that would bring him in and happily cut him or never play him and let him be miserable the rest of his life if it didn't work out. And it pairs with a good because if the standards are a good situation for the team and a good situation for Simmons in the sense of a good coach and a good culture, those two places come to mind. Like wouldn't be Milwaukee. I thought about LA if LeBron's still around in a year, and I think he will be, but that's not the answer.
They don't have enough
there aren't a lot of
around them.
They don't. And like I'm not convinced Rob Pelinka is great at his job, and I'm not convinced that culture is amazing. I think it's maybe all held together by LeBron's singular talent. So I don't know that Simmons there makes a lot of sense. It's not Miami. Can you imagine him in Miami? I mean, I'm just going around the league.
Him and Jimmy, that would be tough.
There aren't many spots.
Producer Aaron says the Warriors, he could be like sort of a Draymond Green light.
I thought about that.
It is kind of a Draymond light.
That's a good one.
And they do have a lot of shooting, so that's actually interesting. That's a pretty good one.
And they have a good culture, right? They have a good culture.
Culture matters too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And you know what? Steve Kerr, who is producer Aaron's favorite, I think that actually might be a good spot.
Plays his strengths. Yes.
Kerr for that. He's a great I'm going to just talk to you and get you to figure out your mindset, and that's something he's actually very good at. Best and worst moments for the Nets.
Best moments is the Bridges trade, obviously, right? Like just the haul that they got. And I mean, I think the worst moment is I would have probably moved on from Cam Johnson or some of those guys. It felt like there was some desperation in the market this summer, and there weren't a lot of people. And you just, not that you run that big a risk, you just don't want to win games. I mean, I wouldn't want to retain any talent on that team. I want to win 9 basketball games. I know that the odds have shifted a couple years ago, right? The tanking is a little bit different now, but whatever. But I'm sort of being picky here. When you're tanking, there's not a lot you can pick at unless you keep some superstar you shouldn't have, and that's not really where they are. But I would have moved Cam Johnson probably.
Yeah, Bridges and the 5 firsts is an insane haul. It's an
amazing.
Absolutely ridiculous haul. That is easily the best. Could they have moved Cam Thomas and Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith? They could have, but they still have time. Right. And that's the thing. What they're doing right now, I love the way they're set up for the future. It's kind of like a mini OKC starter kit. Well, they obviously don't have SGA and a lot of the Chet Holmgren and a lot of the other pieces, but it's just deciding, okay, we need to reboot this and really add some assets. Worst moment. I don't even know. I mean, they're open for business. They brought in Killian Hayes. I don't know. They're fine though, but they have a direction. They know what they're doing, which is great. Which brings us to the last team, because I'm unsure about this. And this is why I was saying not quite dregs, because I don't know if they're going to be bad enough. Last team in the Atlantic Division is the Toronto Raptors, 25-57, 12th in the East last year, in the mid-20s in both offense and defense, right? But they go and they extend Scotty Barnes. He gets a 5-year max. They have Emmanuel quickly. He gets 5 years for 162 like that. RJ Barrett just had a pretty good Olympics.
Yes.
And I am not an RJ Barrett guy at all, but he looked pretty good. And they're under the first apron. So they've got these young pieces. And I guess my question and my concern about the Raptors is they're going to be bad, but they're not going to be bad enough, right? Because you still have the Hornets and the Wizards. There are these other teams in the Eastern, the Pistons that are going to be much worse than you. Which way are the Raptors going?
I don't know what they are. And I don't know if I were being generous, it would be, all right, the guys you just mentioned, and I'm not a big Barrett guy either, but change of sceneries, and he's obviously had flashes both in New York in the summer. Mm-hmm. So there's a player there. If the players you mentioned were a little bit better, maybe I could get around, okay, they're going to win some games this year. They're going to flirt with being the 9 and the 10. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But they'll be sort of an interesting bad team because they're this core they're building to be really good, like the Thunder were a few years ago. But I don't buy that. I like Barnes, and you have to keep him, and he's a really good player. But I don't think Scotty Barnes is a future top 10 player in the NBA. I don't. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander turned out to be, right? That is what you require. So I don't know. I don't know what they are, and I don't know if they know exactly what they are, because I like the pieces that they have. But even in my most optimistic rendering, I don't see that being a top 3 or 4 team in 2 years as currently constructed. It's not like I see them growing into something. So I don't really understand their plan.
the worst possible spot, which is the middle of the pack, right? Like even if they level up a little bit and make it into that 9-10 play-in area, right? Like the Bulls are bad and incompetent, so they could potentially be better than the Bulls. The Hawks, they just unplugged DeJounte Murray. We'll see what they are without him and just having Trae Young running the show. But that doesn't get you anywhere. And then you're not going to be bad enough to be worse than those other teams. So you're not going to be in that Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Like, it's tough.
You're going to get smoked by Boston if you get
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to see what the vision is. Like because you want places to have a vision that you can, right? You know what this reminds me of? Back before Giannis got there, it was a different ownership group, different group of people. But Milwaukee was always an organization, because people that worked there were frustrated by it, where they just wanted to always, this is obviously before the play-in, they just wanted to be in the 7 or 8, they were always just kind of on the hamster wheel of mediocrity, where you almost sort of lost, they weren't bad enough to pay attention to, and they weren't good enough to really matter. And it feels like Toronto's, in the modern era with how it works now, is kind of in that spot where, like, either commit to being really good and go for it, or this is what I think they probably should do, just do a rebuild, let Barnes be your guy for a couple of years on a bad team, and do a full reset. This is the time to do it.
Full reset. That would be the time to do it. Let's do best and worst for the Toronto Raptors as we wrap up our deep dive on the Atlantic Division.
Sure. Locking up Barnes, great. Let's go. Cool. Best. Worst. I don't really have again, because it's just such a not committing to a vision. Again, like when we finish this podcast, and I really enjoy doing it as always, and we say goodbye, I will not think of the Raptors again until I have to watch them play a different basketball team in November.
Until the next gambling scandal with a player deep on their bench that you didn't even know existed.
Too soon, bro. Yeah, that's when.
Yeah, too soon. I have the same ones as you. It's Barnes and quickly re-signing because, great. But also, what's it get you? And then the worst is that they're stuck in the middle, right? I mean, they're not in either. They have 1 foot in 1 foot. And that's why I like the Nets situation so much better, because they decided, we know what we need to do, and good for them. And the Raptors, I don't know that you can do that, because you have a good piece in Scotty. I understand why they're kind of stuck. You have a good piece in Scotty Barnes, but you're right. He's not going to be a top 10 player. So what do you really have in Scotty Barnes? And is Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett enough to make them relevant? It's probably not. So tough stuff for the Toronto Raptors. I'm with you. I'm going to not talk about or think about the Toronto Raptors now for quite some time. This was delightful, Bill. You are going to do the Western Conference deep dives next week. I'll join you for one of those, but you're gonna be back next week with all the Western Conference deep dives. So everybody make sure to check Bill out next week with those. I'm gonna have one more Eastern Conference deep dive. We're gonna do this. Oh, I can't believe you're missing out on the hot Orlando Magic Charlotte Hornets talk that we got coming up on Friday with the South Division deep dive. Yeah, you're going to miss out on that. Brad Bodkin drew that short straw, but everybody's going to be very excited to listen to that. So come back and join us on Friday for the final Eastern Conference Southeast Division deep dive. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Reiter, I am John Gonzalez. Thank you for tuning in so much. We'll see you on Friday.